morning. Welcome to Caffeinate Your Career. Today's topic, qualities recruiters look for in candidates. I'm your host, the career coach with the most, Jason Hopper. With me today is sensational recruiter extraordinaire, Scott Butnick. Scott, welcome to Caffeinate Your Career.
Can I say what you're full of in a LinkedIn?
You can. Of course. Scott, I'm glad that you're back. I told everybody last week you had a thing and weren't able to make it, but we are here and rolling along today. I'm checking to see if we are live, and I can't tell if we're live or not. So, let's do this. All right. So today's topic, Scott, you've been a recruiter for many years, and this particular topic is what is it the recruiters look for when they're looking for candidates? Because that is okay. We are live. I see people popping in the chat. I can hear me now, so the sound is working as well.
Excellent.
All right. So, and guys, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I will be looking at that. Oftentimes people, they go through the interview process. They think they did well. Maybe they did well. Maybe they had a good interview, right? But then they were not chosen to go to the next round. And then they kind of start to wonder why that might be. So I thought it would be interesting if we did a episode of the live stream and podcast on what it is that recruiters are looking for in candidates overall to move them into the next phase.
So, we've all recruiters have seen thousands of resumes. I think that's fair.
Sure.
Thousands of resumes.
Easily.
Hundreds, but sometimes for one job. I don't know. The labor market is loosening. The Fed says the labor market's loosening, but it's still tighter than it was pre-pandemic. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if recruiters are still seeing as many resumes on the same jobs. But having said that, when you look at a lot of resumes, what you begin to realize is that there's a pretty fair convergence on skills. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not absolute. Nothing is absolute. It's just death and taxes, right?
Right.
But there's a reasonable convergence on skills, and so that's exactly right. The person goes into the interview, and they say to themselves, and they're not rationalizing. I think it's a logical sense of self, which is, I know my skills are competitive. Why didn't I get the next interview? Why aren't I interviewing? Why didn't I get the job? Why didn't I get we've talked about make the goal of the interview to continue the process.
That's right.
So why didn't I get the next interview? And what I've seen, and it started to occur to me personally, but about the same time I learned it coming from hiring managers, is the qualifier is passion. Okay. And if you're watching this morning, thank you. If you're watching, you're thinking, but passion is subjective. And I say, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's subjective. What might light my switch from a candidate may not light Jason's, and may not light the next person, but might excite the person after that. It's subjective. It's not discriminatory, and there's a really important difference.
Right.
Okay. We're allowed to think what we want as long as we don't think what we want based on all those factors: skin color, nationality, religion, national origin, and there's age. There's a couple others.
Right.
That's right. Gender. Then it becomes discriminatory. But that doesn't mean that a recruiter or a hiring manager can't be subjective in their assessment.
I think. I'm sorry. I mean,
passion is a subjective assessment.
I got passion right there. Cut you off accidentally. But I think that's right, because when nobody has that exact why.
That's right.
Like why you want to work for this company, and if you were able to convey that, and this is one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to have target companies of specific places where you want to work, because you want to work for that company for whatever the reason.
Right.
And you have to convey that to the recruiter to let them know, here's why I am excited to be here talking to you about this job.
Yeah, and that answer starts to occur on many levels when you start to, peel that onion a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think what I wanted to hear in an interview was excitement that gets generated through passion. And by the way, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but not nervousness. Nervousness is okay in an interview. We've talked about that many times. But nervousness needs to come across as excitement, not as a lack of self-control. And as I've recounted to you, I've seen that, right? But, passion, I like to see it because I will let the hiring manager know that this person is passionate about working for us, about being in this industry, about helping our clients or customers, about helping us provide solutions. Those are the areas of passion where you can articulate an impact. Because one of the difficult, I said it's subjective. I'm going to keep coming back to this, I think, this morning, is that it's subjective. And and the fact that makes it subjective makes it a little challenging to articulate passion. Now, when we talk about passion, okay, the other thing that recruiters and hiring managers want to know is that you're not off the reservation. Yeah. don't, and I've seen it, right? Don't jump down my throat. Eye contact, yes. A hug when you come in my office when we first met, probably not, right? Or certainly for the hiring manager. But there are ways to demonstrate that kind of excitement and certainly that passion. And by the way, if you're thinking, well, I'm in IT, do I have to demonstrate passion? But you don't have to do anything. You don't have to listen to myself or Jason this morning.
Please listen to me and Scott this morning. You were talking about going off the reservation.
There we go.
Butnick just went off the reservation.
Right. But how badly do you want the job? If your skills are the same as the last person who interviewed? What's going to make the determination as to whether you go forward? Your passion, your excitement, and your ability to convey that in a reasonable, professional way.
I remember I was interviewing somebody once, and he was talking about his last job, which was basically he was a greeter at like a ballpark or an event venue where he was clicking.
Okay.
The people. And I remember I'm talking with him, and he stands up in the middle of the interview, and he goes, I just go, and he like walked around. So my desk was here, and he walked around the corner. He said, click, 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 and he's walking and clicking, and click, 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 and I'm like, sit down.
Yeah,
right. like,
excuse me.
Yeah, I was like, what is happening right now? That is like, you talk about going off the reservation. That is a way, like, there's, in the interview, there are things that you can do to make sure that you are conveying that you're excited, and there are things then that you do that are not quite appropriate, and that was one of them.
What I was hoping you'd say was as he went into that, is he demonstrated for you how he would welcome, what he would say, not what he would do, but what he would say to welcome the guests. Yeah. And it didn't go that way. It went the wrong way. And yeah, it's just, whenever I said, most of the people over the years that I recruited were salespeople. If they weren't salespeople, they were at least public contact people. And one of the first questions that I would ask myself, and I happen to think this is legit and reasonable, is this how you're, regardless of how the person is behaving, I'm asking myself, or I'm telling myself, this is how this person's going to behave in front of my customers, my company's customers. Yep. Okay. And if you do something really bizarre like that, it doesn't send the message that you necessarily want to send. And messaging that's probably another session like this. Messaging is really important. Verbal, nonverbal messages that you send in the things that you do.
Yes.
And so, yeah, in that situation, pardon me for being redundant, but I was hoping you were going to tell me what he said to the people coming in the stadium or Walmart or whatever where they do that. Instead, he had to do this over the top demonstration.
Yeah, it would have been a lot more helpful had he told me what it was. Just real quick, good morning, Yolanda. I see you in the chat. She thought that story was funny. And my man, Michael Rosenberg, said that we are live and he can't hear us. So all the equipment's working today, and I love that. Scott, I had a survey. We talk about passion, a survey from Deloitte. And then it says passion is made up of a long-term commitment towards a specific domain or field that is goal-oriented and unruffled by short-term turbulence. A questioning disposition, where they're always seeking knowledge and skills for new challenges, and connecting disposition, meaning a tendency to form strong, trust-based, long-term relationships.
So I'm going to tie this to a thought because it dovetails, and that is the reasonable question someone might be asking themselves this morning. So how do you articulate passion? And you articulate passion by having good, because people have listened to you for years, star stories, or what I call answers to behavior-based questions. Mm-hmm. Because that's what a hiring manager, I'm listening for that. A hiring manager is definitely listening for that when you're answering the question. My favorite one, tell me about a time you had a difficult customer. What was the problem? What did you do? What was the outcome? I want to hear how did you engage with this customer?
Yeah.
Or is it, yeah, I think I shared this with you once. I had somebody, this is back in my days hiring tellers, who said, yeah, I had a difficult customer. So I went in the back room. Okay, not the answer you're necessarily looking for.
I just left.
You're right.
No.
Or I called my manager. Calling your manager is not a bad thing, but it should never be the first answer to that question. Yeah. What did you do with a difficult customer? And I'm looking for, and the hiring manager is looking for, how, I know it sounds redundant, ladies and gentlemen, but how passionate were you about resolving that customer's issues or that project issue for the company that wound up, pardon me, saving the company money or time? When your boss came back to you and recognized you for it, did that make you feel good? That's all part of that story.
Yeah.
And that's all of that, is going to help you articulate your passion for providing that solution. And I've also hired operations people, recruited operations people. And I got that when I asked the hiring manager this is some inside recruiter here. Jason knows this term, but I was doing an intake in a conversation with a hiring manager. And I said, what else? So we need this, we need that, some operations skills. This particular job called for a little. And I said, what else? He said to me, I'm looking for somebody who's excited about being here, Scott. Like a lot of lights go on as a recruiter when you hear that.
Yeah.
I am too, right? Yeah. And so it's as a recruiter, I will tell you, it's actually reinforcing to hear that from a hiring manager, that it's not just a matter of finding very minute skills that are necessary, but maybe we can work through those. We can't work through a lack of passion. We can develop skills. Okay.
I think that's absolutely correct. And also too, you're not going to have all the skills anyway.
Right.
That's
right.
I think that if employers start hiring more for the why and, like you said, train up on the skills, they'll have a better culture.
There are guardrails. Again, you heard me say this, Jason. If your background is in, retail, don't go applying for a job as a nuclear physicist.
Yeah, that's not good.
Okay. You're just career changers. Change careers, okay? And that's probably a couple of these live streams is how to get ready for that.
Yeah.
I've seen people do it successfully. I've seen people that were really challenged. But again, long conversation there. It can be done, but follow your dreams, and follow your goals, but you better give yourself some time, and you better prepare yourself how to get. You're not going to get from point A to point D without going through B and C, and so yeah.
I think another good quality that recruiters are looking for candidates is emotional intelligence.
Oh, for sure.
EQ, right?
Yeah. How to deal with people, how to understand people. People that I think I've always believed people that understand leading people understand the need for EI. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to bring any EI to the table, even as an individual contributor. And especially in today's economy, where I say I go back about 15 years where I started to hear this term cross-functional teams and cross-functional roles. Okay, teams get a lot more done, and if you can't and if you can't work as part of a team, you're going to really struggle in today's economy. And what helps you work? What's important in working as part of a team? Emotional intelligence, understanding where the other person is coming from.
I think yes, and using being self-aware. I think is
absolutely
one of the traits that you want in a candidate.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to use their emotions to have that empathy, have that compassion and understanding, and realizing things about? So I think like once you figure out you, everything else becomes a lot easier.
Self-awareness is so important, and self-awareness is also very difficult to define. Minds far greater than mine have taken on the challenge of defining and articulating self-awareness. But I think of it in terms of basic terms. It's knowing when, how, what, and why to do something. Okay, and what it is you're going to do, why you're doing it, when to do that. Okay, and how to do it. I used to have, a number of years ago, as a recruiter at Bank of America, one of our functions was to recruit internally. Now that had specific applications. We couldn't go out after people, but once they posted, the recruiting process was pretty much the same as for an external. But the one question that used to come up was, well, when and what do I tell my boss? Because I wanted to. Is my boss going to be angry? And you have egos in the business world, and some of them got, I think the British have a phrase, chuffed. Mm-hmm. They get a little bit, like at least a little bit put off by this. And I think it's inappropriate. You're supposed to help your employees grow.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would now, whether it was a thin barrier or a thick barrier in the relationship, and then it almost became a little bit incumbent upon the hiring manager to hire the person just to get the person out of the soup with their existing manager, right? But what I would always say to them is, you should let your hiring manager know, and the best way to do that is, so Jason, I'm thinking about posting. I noticed a job on the internal posting system. What would your feedback be about that? Okay, and get some buy-in, and maybe you'll identify some opportunities that might be necessary for me, and maybe you'll say, hey Scott, knowing the level you've been working at and what you've been accomplishing, I think that'd be a great move for you. Okay, because so-and-so is about to call you because I posted for the job.
I think too, if you're able to ask for that recommendation, and that goes for not only for like internal type of things, but external references as well, right?
Sure.
Like I did the same thing. I went for here. I'm not looking for work now, but when I was looking for work, and I applied here, and I was connected to our lead at the time, Mitch, and Mitch has since retired. But I sent him a direct message after I did the application, attached my resume. Mm-hmm. Then I turned around and called my buddy, Bob Mitchell, who I knew had done a presentation here. And so I know he knows somebody. I don't know who he knows, but he did a presentation in our building. And so I called him and asked him, hey, do you mind recommending me for this position?
Uh-huh.
And he ended up writing up like seriously like about this long an email to our HR manager Marlene, talking me up, and so like before I even got here to the interview,
they knew you were coming.
I had two different people
Yeah.
recommending me for the position.
Yeah, critical.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that it's important, guys, to utilize your network. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
You stole my, yeah. It's so important, it's worth being redundant. That's when people say, what are the challenges I have in networking is what do I talk to people about when I'm networking, even after I've established the relationship. Good for you. This is one of those times you leverage your network. Okay. Hey, I'm thinking about going out into so-and-so field, or I saw a job on the internet for such and such. And what do you think about that, knowing me as well as you do? What strengths could I bring to it, and what opportunities do I have with respect to this? It's a good way to reconnect with your network on an occasional basis.
Well, I think too, it's also good to just, yes, when you start to do networking things, you have to foster the network. And you don't have to continue to go back to them and send a DM or a text message like, hey, I'm still looking for work. Don't forget about me. I'm over here. Yeah. But just as you start to get to know them, it might just be, hey, Scott, I send you a DM or an email because I got your email. Hey, Scott, I just read this article about recruiting and the ATS. Thought you might be interested. Thanks, Jason. Yeah. Off you go. Yeah. You try to provide that value, or even if I don't know, you do a virtual meeting. The first meeting you have, you're talking with them, and they're all of a sudden you see that they have a cat that jumps back up onto the desk, and they have a cat. Okay, great. Send a funny cat meme. You don't have to continue to pound them in the head that you're looking for work and that you want something from them. It's just a matter of kind of and I think like back in the day when Facebook first started, they had the poke feature. You could just hit the poke, and you could poke.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
You're poking,
and let them know, hey, I'm still around. But you don't have to be all in their face with it as well. Right.
And I'm just circling around here. You're right about that. I remember that too. I'm circling back to the relationship between emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And that's a great concept on your part. I hadn't thought of self-awareness originally as part of this, but you triggered a lot of thoughts. And the fact is, they are almost inextricably linked, if you'll allow me that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they both speak to the same thing. I don't know that I can define self-awareness, but I know it when I see it. Okay? We know, as recruiters, we know it when we see it.
Yeah.
Okay? So
it's part confidence, I think, and part being vulnerable at the same time.
Agreed. In fact, when you talk, I think in the discussion of both of these concepts, when we talk about how to approach your network, hey, I'm thinking of going after such and such a job. What would your feedback be? Okay, what that does is that feels good to the mentor. It's like, this person trusts my thoughts. Mm-hmm. They trust whatever wisdom I bring to the table. Yeah, and it makes them feel good. And if you've made somebody feel good, you can check your emotional intelligence box and your self-awareness box for the day. And if you do it twice that day, you're a home run hitter.
Yeah.
Okay. So listen, these things are what's the term? These things are transcendental in life. They don't just apply to the job market, although they are critical in the job market. But if you can make people feel better, one person feel good about themselves each day, you're doing really well.
Yeah, it just could be dropping somebody a text message or DM, letting them know you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
You never know how that's going to go. I think also too, recruiters look for is commitment. They want to make sure that your values are aligned with the company because they don't want to start this process over again here in a few months.
No. It has, and there have been studies done about this, but that has a monetary cost. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I read something. This probably goes back not 10 years, but more than 5 years. That the cost of a failed hire is in excess of $100,000 to a company, and that's based on training, the employee's salary, the trainer's salary, the materials necessary to get the employee up to speed, so on and so forth. And nothing is as crippling to a company's success opportunities as high turnover.
Yeah.
And it's endemic in some industries. If I go back far enough in my career, I was in fast food, and we would see turnover rates in the median in these restaurants at 150%, which would be crushing to a lot of industrial organizations and technology organizations today.
Right.
But they're accounted for in other industries, and almost accepted. Nobody ever. I didn't accept it, but I had to deal with it. Okay, and so they're looking for that. They're looking for a values match. Skills match is what got you in the door. Values match is what gets you an offer. Okay.
I think you're correct. And when, especially like when I was doing a lot of recruiting for like customer service, like call center people, right? Because you need 25 people for the class.
Yeah.
Not all 25 are going to make it through training. So it's a continual thing that you're recruiting for, and you have to look at, not only the like why they want to work here, so I just want a job, but like, are they going to stick?
Yeah. And if you're wondering, okay, so how do I get there? Where do I go? Well, that's why we've talked about researching the company and the individual. In fact, you mentioned that when we had this discussion a few weeks ago, and it's very true, and it's very accurate, very apropos to the moment. And I had forgotten it, which is why I thought I'd point out that you were right in mentioning it when you did. But find something out about the person, because when you find something about the person, you find more out about the values that you need to be able to articulate.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And again, all of this. I said we'd probably come back to this. This all comes back to self-awareness. When do you articulate? If you just spew this in the middle of a conversation with somebody, I know that Jason is a big Texas Rangers fan. So in the middle of a conversation about the best way to treat employees, I say, by the way, we should all go out to a Rangers game. Well, I love that idea because I'm a big Texas Rangers fan too. But if I pick the wrong time, that's going to be a head scratcher for Jason as the hiring manager. And head scratchers, ladies and gentlemen, you don't want any head scratchers in the
No, you were like,
okay.
That was weird. Why did he say
Exactly.
that?
But that was weird.
Yeah.
And weird is rarely good. Okay.
I mean, yeah, you want to stand out, but you don't want to stand out for the wrong reason.
Unless, and I had this in a mock interview a couple of weeks ago, where somebody articulated it's not weird. There's a difference between weird and out of the box. Out of the box is something that somebody hasn't tried before or somebody hasn't thought about before. Weird is weird, okay? Weird is when you can't justify the reason, the solution you propose.
That's right.
And this person put on the table in an interview, mock interview, that we had a conversation about an out-of-the-box solution, and it was like, wow, a lot of lights went on. That I would want to hire a person that comes up with that, even if we're not talking about solving the Gaza issue. It's about a fairly mundane issue with a different approach and a different solution. And it worked for the person because at least he told me so. Okay. And so, yeah, you never want to leave anybody thinking, wow, that was a weird idea that person had, or a weird approach.
I have a client that she's a professor, and she teaches abnormal psychology. Right. Yeah. Right.
Wow.
And so I was talking to her, and I'm like, have you considered when people ask what it is you do, you say, I teach students about psychopaths.
Yeah.
And then stop talking, because immediately, and you kind of laugh, but the thing is, it's like, I'm sorry, what?
Mm-hmm.
And now you got that's the hook.
Engaged.
That's the hook. And that at that point, that whomever you're talking to will be like, want to keep talking and having that conversation. Yeah. And because not a lot of people are going to be teaching people about psychopaths. So the point being, if you can come up with that hook that gets the person engaged, you got it for the rest of the time.
That's right. You had me at the hook, so to speak. Yeah.
Scott, you mentioned the mock interviews. We do have a mock interview program. It's today, actually. We do it the second and fourth week of each month. It is full up for today. The next time we're going to be doing it is September 10th at 1 and 2 Central. They're all virtual. You can interview with Scott. You can interview with somebody else on the team. If you're interested, email me at the letter J, Hopper, HOPPER, at jfsdallas.org. Tell me, put mock interview in the subject and tell me what time you want, and I will reserve your spot. They're going fast. I already got like 2 spots filled already.
Really?
For next go.
Next go?
Yeah.
Wow.
On the 10th.
Yeah, and be prepared when you do this. The professionals that work on this, well, the other 3 people that do this, the professionals that do this have heard it all. They've seen it all. We've seen it all. Be prepared to know when you talk about something in an interview that helps you, and be prepared to be helped. In other words, be prepared for some constructive feedback.
Yeah, feedback. That's
okay. Not only it won't be just you shouldn't do that. It's you shouldn't do that. Try this the next time. I think that's the difference between criticism and coaching.
Yes.
If I criticize you, all I do is tell you didn't do something well. If I coach you, I help you do it better the next time.
That's the goal of the program. And
very much so.
It was just like 2 weeks ago when you were here, and I announced that we had somebody that went through it, two interviews and ended up landing. So it does work. Scott, you talked a minute ago. We talked about track record, right? Is another thing that recruiters are looking for. Can you go in, tell me a star story, and quantify it, and come up with a success?
Tell you, you want me to tell you?
Not you tell me. Oh. I'm just saying, like as the candidates going in should be prepared to have those stories and be able to have a track record behind them of their success and the things they can do.
I preface a lot of what I say with, you don't have to do anything, ladies and gentlemen. You can do things as you did yesterday. But if you do things as you did yesterday, you have no right but to expect the same result. And if you're watching this, it's because you sense that there's an opportunity for you to get better in interviews. Okay? What's going to make you better in interviews? To me, first and foremost, skills matter. Yes, skills matter. But be a storyteller.
Yeah.
Be prepared with stories. And it's really difficult. Hey, Scott, what story should I be prepared to tell? Well, very at a hopefully useful but generic level. Like I said, I've said this already this morning. Think about a tough, not an unsuccessful customer experience, but a tough customer experience. Okay. Now, it usually works out better for you if you tell me a story that has a positive ending.
Right.
Unless, and this is something we've discussed, I ask you to tell me about one that doesn't.
Tell me a time you failed.
That's right.
Tell me about a time
you had. I like to use customers. Tell me about a time you had a customer or client and you couldn't solve it. What happened? What was the end game? The question I've gotten in this discussion about this type of question is, what is that person really looking for? Everybody knows we're not all successful 100% of the time.
Right.
The question becomes, what did you do to deal with it? How did you deal with the one after that? What did you learn? That's when, and you've got, this takes preparation because it forces you to think about these situations in which you found yourself. And it's not always easy. I'm not saying that the process of preparing for an interview or preparing these stories is going to be easy. The more experienced you are, the longer you've been in the workforce, I kind of think it ought to be a little bit easier for that person. And that's only fair. But it forces you to think about these experiences. So, but the reason I make that point is, if I ask you to tell me about one that didn't end successfully, and you don't, well, then my notes are, he or she couldn't follow instructions. And that's not quite a death sentence in a corporate interview, but it's close.
Well,
okay? And it happens, believe it or not.
That's the other part of that is, well, two parts, two things. One, generally people are not, they're fairly natural storytellers because every time we're talking to people, we're telling a story,
That's right.
right? Like I was just telling Brenda earlier that I didn't sleep well and I woke up early and then I got up and then I went back to like it's just we tell stories all day.
You didn't sleep well because I was on the live stream.
No, I was excited. That's right. That's exactly correct. I was excited to have you back here, and I did sleep. In fact,
He's not using the word nightmares, ladies and gentlemen.
Sometimes I will, as I'm trying to go back to sleep, it's like, how am I going to introduce Scott to what's going to rhyme? What alliteration can I use?
Yeah,
it's
you have to think about it. You have to be prepared. Think about a customer. Okay, here's another generic one. Think about a time you had a challenging team member that you had to work with. Okay, how'd you make it work? Think about a time you got some coaching that really challenged you. How'd you manifest that? How'd you make it work? These are, and then in your own milieu or venue, if you will, branch out from there and think about other things that you've come across, because those are the things that the recruiter or the hiring manager is likely going to ask you about.
I think too that comes back to being self-aware.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And we're going to bring that back around because as
yeah.
you're talking and having or telling your story or stories, how self-aware are you? Because like if you don't see or there's never been a conflict between you and a teammate, I think that you probably are not looking at it in an objective manner. I mean, nobody's really going to get along.
And again, I think it's again, pardon the redundancy, but again, when you go into those things happen. If I thought enough about it, I could tell you about ones that went that way for me personally. Those things happen. But when you're interviewing, think positive. Don't sugarcoat it. But you're going to be more effective ending it with, so we worked out our differences and we actually worked together on a couple more projects very successfully. Okay? Rather than, well, I never talked to this teammate again the last 2 years I worked for the company.
So we have a question from Phil Buckmeyer who asks, how do you answer a question where you never had any experience with the problem that they presented?
I would get as close to it as I could.
Yeah.
And I think if that happens, that's interesting, Phil. And hi, I hope you're well. I think if it happens more than once, then, and we all have to do this sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, but you have to think about whether you belong in that interview because that hiring manager wants that problem has probably occurred in that venue, on that team. And maybe they knew how to deal with it, maybe they didn't. That hiring manager wants to see how you dealt with it. And if you haven't experienced it, you might be barking up the wrong tree in terms of the type of job.
I think if you could maybe come up with a possible scenario. That's never really happened to me. However, I'm pretty straightforward and open. And should I have had a conflict with my supervisor or team member, I would go and talk to them and see if we can't come up with what you would do. And that's a great question too, Phil. Thank you, because if you're just starting out in your career, you may not have had a difficult customer. You may not have had a bad boss. You may not have had a headbutting with your coworker, your teammate. So coming up with what could be, I think, is better than nothing.
I just like this word, a parallel. Come up with a parallel. If the question is, if you're just out of school, that's where I'm seeing what you just kind of articulated.
Yes.
And you tell me about a time you had a customer that was difficult. Well, maybe you could say, I haven't been in front of too many people in a public contact situation, but I can tell you about a time I had there was an issue between myself and a student at school, whether it's college, high school, middle school, whatever, and how you dealt with it and what came out of it. Um, I, I, a parallel is probably the best example I could come up with.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it's a fair question, and I don't mean to dodge it, but I will also say this. It's one of those times where I like to tell people when we start an interview, and I'm careful about that word because they're conversations. But I'll tell them if you need a moment or two to pull your thoughts together because I'm asking you to delve into your past, be comfortable taking that time. This is one of those times you want to think about that, is when you can't match up exactly. But maybe if you think about it, you can come up with a parallel situation that describes and articulates at least what you think the hiring manager is looking for. And if you were wrong, then they should tell you so. Or they should frame the question in a slightly different way.
Well, and so if that happens, it's okay for you to ask as well. Can I take a quick minute to think about that before I answer the question?
Sure. And again, that's the same thought. But I'll come back to what I originally said. If you're I'm picturing here an IT interview, and the hiring manager says to you, so tell me about the last time an ITXH TH36 failed on you. What did you do? What was your part in fixing it? And you have no idea what this person's talking about.
Right.
Then you need to think about whether you're in the right interview or not.
Right.
Okay. And if it happens twice and you're swinging and missing twice, then gut it out. Be polite. Be a professional. And it's probably not going to happen because you can't. Look, I can't solve the problems for somebody that I'm not qualified to solve.
Correct. Well, it's, when I talk to clients and I tell them where it is that I am able to help them, where I'm an expert, right?
Yeah.
And if they come back with, so can you help me with my finance? I'm like, no, you can go talk to Brendan down the hall. I can't help you with that. I'm not a numbers guy.
And as a recruiter, as I've said to a lot of you folks where we've had the opportunity to meet here at JFS, and I've told Jason, over the years as a recruiter, I've interviewed too. And there have been times as a recruiter, I'll get the question, so tell me about your experience, or it's more closed-ended. How much experience do you have with HR information systems? I'm a user. I'm certainly a user, but I've never input information. And I got to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you let the chips fall. Don't overextend your qualifications. Don't lie. Right. Don't lie in an interview. Don't lie on your resume. It always comes back to get you. It will, and it can mean getting an offer and being out of the job before the first week is up.
Yeah, for sure, because they expect you to have that skill.
That's absolutely right. And now you've deceived them. Not only do you not have the skill, but you've deceived them about it intentionally to gain employment, and that never ends well. Never.
So Scott, we're about at time. Thanks, guys, for the comments too. I was able to see the comments. We had comments. I had comments last week, but for some reason was not able to see them. But I can't see them today. Everything is working right. Scott, fun question for the day. What is your favorite ice cream?
Ooh, I need to get that one sometime.
Yeah, that's fine.
Only because I eat ice cream. I like ice cream, but I don't go bonkers over ice cream. So what is my favorite ice cream? I really like cookie dough ice creams.
Oh.
I really like mint chip type of ice cream.
Mint chocolate chip is my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chocolate mint chip. I'll eat chocolate chip. I tell you what, I'll answer a different question with your permission. What ice cream don't I like? Ice cream with almonds or peanuts or anything. Chips are okay. Chocolate chips, but hard textures just doesn't work for me with soft ice cream.
I can see it.
But a lot of people love ice cream with almonds and peanuts on it. Yeah, I get that.
What about you? Oh, so people are telling me right now, Yolanda likes Rocky Road. Thank you, Phil, for watching. So next week, there will not be a live stream next week because it's the day after Labor Day, and some of us will be laboring and catching up. So no live stream next week. The following week, though, we will have Irene Krasnov in to kick off a 2-week Overcoming Adversity podcast and live stream. So come back for that. Scott, you'll be back on the 24th
Looking forward to it.
of this next month. We will be redoing interview mistakes because we had technical difficulties that day, and Scott and I were spitting fire. So y'all should see that. So that'll be on the 24th, and coming up also too on the 3rd, I will be doing a presentation at the Workforce in Plano at 1101 Resource Drive, Plano 75074. It's Ask a Career Coach Day. Come, show up, ask me questions. I will answer any questions regarding job search and apparently ice cream. We'll see you then. You have a great week and a great holiday. Bye.
So long.